I helped co-found this organization in 2020 as a response to the COVID pandemic, kind of in the spirit of the Victory Gardens. We actually networked with over 43 area community gardens. Our mission has been twofold: to create and increase access to good food and to build good community connections in the process. In our first couple of years, we were doing quite a lot of garden tours, and that experience was so invaluable for not just getting that connection at that time when we were all on lockdown, but trading useful tips, insights, resources, and information, as well as offering each other support. Managing these community gardens, even though we're in community, can still feel a little bit siloed and kind of like a farm, I'd say. So when we're getting together and sharing with each other, we're also giving each other support. These are some photos from those early years tours, and a couple of these gardens aren't currently going that I'm aware of. And these are some more photos from the tours. This is Boer Community Garden, their epic irrigation system. These are a couple of photos from the garden that I started with One Stone High School on Cole Road. This Shauna Garden's with me. This is Ariel, who was just here, and this is at the Harvest Heroes Garden in Nampa, a veterans garden. So in the last couple of years, I have been working nearly full-time, but that didn't leave me a lot of time to work on this organization. But what I was able to do was help keep a map going so that people could find their nearest community garden and find out which one was open to the public and needing gardeners. And I was also able to start doing a little deeper survey work the last couple of years. So these questions are in alignment with these survey questions. So why gardeners garden? Why they do this in community? The first reason was social connection. The first reason was food, but the next biggest reason was social connection, personal health, stress alleviation, and these are students, they're really working it out, and access to nutrient-dense food. Nutrient density, being not necessarily last on the list, but this is just how the questions were answered. But food is really important. And when we did our annual meetup this year, I started calling it the Green Space Garden Mixer. Towards the end of January, this is kind of what we were looking at. This was January 21st that we met. Grocery prices are up about 25% since 2020, compared to 3% between 2017 and 2020. And this slideshow's been updated since that Green Space Garden Mixer because I'm starting to get really concerned about what could be happening with food costs with the talk of the tariffs. To the extent that I've looked into what percentage we kind of count on in our grocery stores for produce. So I've got an article here on the TVCGCoop website about some of these stats and numbers and talking about some things. There are a lot of people gardening in these spaces to supplement their household need. So as I said, we're inspired by the Victory Gardens, and we built that network of over 40 gardens by 2022. And noting, most of those gardens already existed. There were only like a handful of gardens that really started up in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are part of a proud tradition. During the Victory Garden era, 20 million gardens got started, I believe. 20 million Victory Gardens got going. And the stats for supplementing a household food supply was incredible. And it was something like 40%. So this is a archived article from the New York Times. But in the last couple of years, just due to capacity and all of the things, returning to work, returning to life as normal, time and volunteer time has been somewhat compromised. And we've been able to maintain some level of communication with about 25 gardens and in responsive dialogue with about 11. The majority of these gardens are managed on a volunteer basis, aside from one or two organizational roles. Out of the 11 responsive gardens, 8 of them aren't sure how long they will be able or willing to continue managing the gardens. and 3 of them need management support this season to varying degrees. One decided to let the garden go fallow for a season. At least 2 of these gardens would welcome tours with master gardeners. So if you're curious to learn more about them, there's some really incredible gardens. This is a poster created for an opportunity with the Boise Public Library. There's 2 branches that have seed libraries, and these will be hanging at both of those locations. I've started discussion just across the street with the Garden City Library, and we'll be reaching out to the libraries nearest all the gardens so that people in our community who are often really could use a garden and use that opportunity, but we may not be reaching them, may be able to see and learn about these available local community gardens that way. We've also had a lot of challenges. So one of the things I've been identifying in these surveys the last couple of years, the biggest challenges for gardeners, like why don't we have the numbers? Why can't we find garden management support? This is mainly the gardener response. There's lack of time, there's too few gardeners, which makes the amount of work to do pretty substantial. And can't compost weeds on site was a big thing that came up. We did try to work with City of Boise on that last year. Several of our gardens are located on church properties, and that doesn't fall within the realm of service for city compost to pick up. So a lot of gardens, their gardeners will take it home and dispose of it in their residential compost. That's a challenge we haven't quite figured out a way to work on yet. The City of Boise Climate Action Division did apply for a grant 2 years ago to try to help us with that, but they didn't get it. When we did the Green Space Garden Mixer, this was a great example of what happens when we're working together. We compiled our knowledge about how we're dealing with weeds and compost, and the majority of everybody was like, get to the weeds when they're tiny, get to the weeds when they're like hair thin, and that totally makes sense. And we even learned that one of the gardens wasn't so much worried about disposing of the weeds. They'd lost a portion of their garden that had been their compost system to an affordable housing project, and she's actually dealing with a lot of great plant matter that could be composted, but she doesn't have a spot to put it. So last year she spent like $2,000 to just throw it away. So there's opportunities here to network, share resources, but some of these goals are quite big. This, working on that particular one, like moving around substantial amounts of plant material, could be a year 2 or 3 kind of goal. My first goal this year is supporting garden managers to preserve our gardens. And another big concern amongst gardeners everywhere, home gardeners as well, and farmers, farm workers, has been health concerns. This is a photo that I put together both in my old job at Snake River Seeds, but also just because, and this is with good old-fashioned Photoshop, but you can see the air quality difference just between like 2 weeks in September. And I went and shot this on the bench so you can see the whole valley. And then in October, we had that fire that happened like right next to the valley. It was really concerning. We're all dealing with impacts to our ability to do this work, and it even impacts the harvest. So this is Meridian Co-op Gardeners. This is Juli's garden, and they've just done some incredible work over the years, worked with a great number of people. Juli runs a really amazing program with excellent structure and has been mentored to several garden managers in the area and those who wanted to start co-op gardens and learn about the ins and outs of that. Been really generous with sharing tools and information. This is the garden that we started with the high schoolers at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. We're building hugel mounds here. This is what it looked like when we first got there in the lower corner. That's chicory. That was just about taller than all of us. This is my first year sprouting seeds. I've come a long way. And then just in case we forgot what it looked like during COVID, this was an empty set of shelves. Of course, this was like the ramen noodles area. And I was like, what's going on? But, those are the things that keep and the things that a lot of people know how to cook. We have some pressures with our gardens. A few gardens have faced development pressure. This is not a local news story, but this is just an example of the pattern that happens nationally at various places, like this competition for valuable remaining land. So at the Green Space Garden Mixer, I was talking about the importance of preserving green spaces. With our network, we've been able to advocate for gardens that were facing development pressure in a couple of instances. Not in every instance. We do what we can just by basically creating a letter and sharing the benefits of that garden for that population that it's serving, for the individuals that are gardening there, and even for the community. These are just photos of things pulled from the garden. This is an overwintered set of radish and turnip, and a really great garden day and more garden bounty. So also with the challenges and the identifying of challenges, I wanted to raise the awareness that I think what we're kind of seeing is a little bit of an echo of what's happening in agriculture, where there's farmers that are retiring and they can't find new farmers, or their family isn't necessarily stepping up to take on farming. And at the same time, there's young farmers looking for access to land. There's people that have been volunteering and holding these garden spaces together for years out of the passion for it and an understanding of the necessity for it. But we don't have like a familiar dialogue going just yet about like any kind of way to compensate the next wave of garden managers if that would make a difference. So that's been a thing that I've been exploring. And I took these screenshots right before the meeting for the Green Space Garden Mixer. A lot of people are facing, like, if they're renting, this is what the market looks like. I'm sure you know, we know to varying degrees. And this is what the home buying market looks like. So some garden managers or would-be garden managers, like, we're looking at the time involved in running a garden, and we still like have our families to answer to. So a stipend, even if it's the arbitrary amount that I've been working with to start with of $2,000 for a season's worth of work, it's not a lot, probably wouldn't come close to covering the actual hours involved, but at least it's something. So I can come home to my fiance and say, darling, I promise, I got something. And we're seeing, you know, as another reason for need for these gardens is a real uptick in interest amongst school-age kids, which is really cool. And that's due in no small part to a few, you know, to every garden manager who steps up in the school space or supports it. And that's teachers who are doing extra, and then that's parents who are championing that garden for the seasons that their kids are there. And then there's a program through Bugs where they're trialing like 2 or 3 different gardens that they're working with schools. But we're also finding like a trend, a lot of gardens trying to find that compromise with schools and districts and administrators are talking about pollinator gardens, which are rad. Pollinators are really important, as we all know, but there's a lot of kids who are like, I still want to grow food. So an additional compromise to maybe think about that I've been exploring in the survey the last couple of years is asking area community gardens if they would partner with the nearest school, and that would allow kids an opportunity to go visit a garden and see just how much food we can grow in this valley and see what's involved. And then the school doesn't necessarily have to maintain that whole space, but hats off to the places where they have like 8 to 30 beds and they've got a whole production garden going, and the kids can take part in growing that carrot from seed to, you know, harvestable. So there's just a host of garden benefits, as we know. And then in the learning space, they've also noted some other amazing benefits. And I should have had a slide in here of the outcomes of the importance of green spaces from the mixer, because a lot of people shared a lot of heartfelt perspective about what kids are getting out of these spaces. Sure.
How are you doing this with the schools? If schools here let out in May, and so it's kind of hard to see that carrot go from seed to...
Yeah. Juli could speak to that.
Okay.
There are, I'm connected to a garden school at Barbara Morgan STEM Academy over in Meridian. There's 18 beds. My daughter, as a parent, took that over in 21. And that was my question, because I'm running the community garden, which we operate April through October, and they're heading out in May, actually first part of June now, and then coming back in August. And so she and I have been researching the last few years the best crops that we could incorporate out there that utilize the students' time, but then they can come back and harvest those things. Some gardens actually have managers that work through the summer and have parents and students lined up to come help with sign-up times. We found that to be rather cumbersome and reliable. And so we have There's garlic planted. It, of course, is being harvested during the summer when the students are gone, but it's shared in the fall when the students come back. We plant potatoes in the spring. The kindergartners plant potatoes in the spring for the next incoming kindergarten class to dig up in the fall. Carrots can stay in the ground for quite a while. The radishes, things like cucamelon, those grow early on and they can be harvested before they leave. That garden, we're right now trying to get the buy-in for more teachers to be involved. They're not sure how that fits in their day. And they have so many other things that they have to do that doesn't fit. But she's got the buy-in from a handful of teachers, and we go with that. But she grows tomatoes and peppers. We've done melon. Squash is hard because of the squash bug and the vine-borne pressure. That's just hard to keep track of. In the fall, the kids come in early summer, fall. They're able to harvest August and September tomatoes and peppers that they're able to share with the students that are a part of that and with the teachers in the teachers' lounge. Yes. Some of these gardens are native perennial plants that need, little care. Some of them are on timers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have good AmeriCorps presence here, at least in the Boise system and with the Boise schools. Yeah. So they're definitely, and with bugs, they're definitely doing more than we are in Meridian on that. But we also have a number of schools that do have gardens in Meridian. And just another note on the school end, at the high end, we still have a number of FFA programs in Meridian and CUNA and Nampa, Caldwell. Boise took that out of their school system a number of years ago, but we still have a number of horticulture and agriculture programs, which I just think are a great benefit to those of us that live in the community.
That's how I got started.
Yeah.
High school horticulture class.
Yeah.
And that was 1998 that I graduated, but I remembered how to grow tomatoes. And did that for several years. This is actually middle school age, and that's with the AmeriCorps volunteer. And this is an assembly at Fairmont Junior High where students are doing an activity of partner planting, winter sowing. So they've got one student in front and one student behind. You can't see what's going on, so you got the arms and then you got the eyes guiding. It was really funny. There was a whole bleachers full of kids behind me. And then this is winter sowing at Grace Jordan Elementary, where we worked with 65 to 75 kids that day. It was wild. And this is seed paper activity. So, there's some real garden champions making this fun for them and really engaging, and they get so excited. This is our educator who does this, and then Juli, and then Jennifer. And then I've been working with One Stone students, and we actually went, a bunch of us, to the Idaho Hunger and Food Security Summit in November of 2023. And that was an incredible experience because the whole conference with all of these stakeholders in there were really influenced by this group of high schoolers that were just there, being themselves, asking good questions, learning about the whole summit. It's really fascinating, like that generational dynamic. And this is the same group of students in the garden. So I started asking that question about stipends, and when I started asking that question, I was trying to get what our common understanding of responsibilities would be. And I was framing these around some grant and funding reporting requirements, such as what crops are grown and notes on outcome, how much food's grown, how many individuals and families are served, soil health activities to improve resilience, and how much food is donated. One garden, as I pitched this notion to them in the survey over the phone, said that it would probably be pretty easy for that group to bless someone, in this case it was a church, bless someone in the community with something like they do pay someone to take care of their lawn and run a weed eater around the property. And I totally loved that she shared that. But then I got to thinking about just what goes into garden management and how much more work it can be. So I'm scoping, getting an idea of how big the project really is. But there's things that can be generated right now and things that we've been working towards. I got to work with an intern from BSU last year who did some research for me and helped me compile more information. So there's volunteer resources to help gardens and gardeners. Some of them require nonprofit status. That's been kind of a barrier for our organization because we're not an official nonprofit yet. After the 21st, the next week, I think we had the big federal funding scare, basically, and that's still leaving all these nonprofits and all of these really important parts of our community reeling, frankly. But I made a hard pivot because I didn't have anything quite in place yet, because my background's marketing and I'm pretty good with online stuff. I started thinking about localized, sustainable fundraising strategies. So I've got a membership tier that I'm mapping out that could work with area businesses, could work with area organizations. I'm just thinking about sustainable strategies. And one of those strategies is collaborating with area artists. I'm in the art community as well, and friends with a number of collectives, actually. I'll be meeting with a number of artists from the Catalyst Arts Collective. I'm doing a little Zoom meeting tomorrow to talk about the online store, because I can do that through this website, and I'm pretty good at that. And these are examples of things we could do that are garden themed. And this meets a couple of goals, which I'm pretty excited about. It'll provide regional artists an online sales channel that they don't already have. But while we're doing that, as a system of mutual benefit, they can build awareness about the gardens and what they're capable of, the wild potential of garden abundance, all while creating a little bit of income for themselves too. It'll be a commission arrangement. But in that process, we'll be reaching an audience that gardens and small-scale local ag may not otherwise be in touch with. So I'm pretty excited about that. This is one artist, for example, like how creative this could get. Laura Feeney works with cyanotype. It's cool. It's printing with the sun, basically. It's some kind of dye that is solar responsive. She's been doing this for some years. Like, she did garden keepsakes, but she would like to do an in-garden workshop working with the materials from the garden, and that can engage people of all ages. I'm starting to build out garden pages for each one of the gardens. I've got a streamlined process for being able to do that. His name's Don, and he's a master gardener also, so he can offer in-garden learning opportunities, which is really cool. But he said he's thinking about a stipend now. Then another thing that we can do with this organization that I'm pretty excited about, and thanks for taking it on, Juli, is these private garden pages. So a password-protected page for the members of a garden to be able to access all of the resources that the garden manager puts together. And that includes, like set up documents for the season, a blog if you wanted to communicate the steps of the season monthly or weekly or quarterly.
So I'm Juli Bokencamp, and I've run the community garden in Kleiner Park since 2013. The garden opened in 2012 when the park opened, midsummer, so it was a late season for that group. The woman in charge of it was a friend of mine, and they originally had a traditional community garden over behind the Sonic area on Fairview, and everybody had their own 10 by 10 plot. And when they talked to the city wasn't interested in individual plots because they knew what that would turn into, people abandoning properties. I don't think people fully understand, and you're learning or have learned, we have a challenging environment to garden in. And so it's really easy for people to just quit mid-season because it's too hot, it's too smoky, it's not fun, it's repetitive. And so I think people are looking, that's something that we offer in our garden, being a communal garden, because we've got a number of people working together. But anyway, so I joined the garden in 2013 to help out a friend. We planted the garden in April and May, and she moved in June. And there were about 15 of us that were involved, and there was nothing in place. And we used to show up whenever we wanted, write our hours in a little book, and then get a phone call when we were going to harvest something. And when she left, a few people said, this place is going to die if somebody doesn't take over. And my husband said, you're not doing anything right now. Why don't you do that garden? It was in 2013.
Are you still married?
Yeah. And I told him, I think in about 21, he was kind of hoping the garden would be done. And I told him I would stop gardening when he stops beekeeping. So we kind of have a fair trade there. Anyway, so I took over that garden in 2013, and I met with the 15 people that were involved, and I said, what's working, what's not working? And what was not working for them is they said, we thought it was a community garden, but we never see anybody here, because people were working whenever they wanted to work. So I said, let's change that. Let's work on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, and let's work Saturday mornings at 8 o'clock. It's now 8:30. But So we have for the last, this is going on my 13th year, we meet Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock and Saturday mornings at 8:30. And unless you camp every weekend or you're planning a trip to Europe for the summer, you're probably a good fit for the garden. But otherwise, you know, if you're gone all the time, it's a problem. People with kids in sports, we work out arrangements so they can make up some time to be able to still be a part of the garden. But we allow 33 families to join. They pay a total of $40 to do that. And they agree to work with us. We have a total of, I have reduced it every year, we are down to 38 work days on a property that's 0.67 of an acre. We work 2 Saturdays in April, 2 Saturdays in May, and then starting June through mid-October, we work Tuesdays and Saturdays. But I've got 38 work days. And I know my sister garden, we just opened a new garden at Discovery Park, which is down off of Lake Hazel, I believe. And I think they've got about 52 days on their schedule right now. So I've just got a pretty good system. We've got it pretty well oiled. We sort of know what we're doing. We maintain a Facebook page, Meridian Club Gardeners on Facebook, and we try to share what we've learned and what we're doing with the community. We have children involved in our program of the parents who come to the garden, so we have a children's program that we're involved in. The gardeners plan, plant, care for, and harvest the food, and we share that harvest. Every family goes home with a share's worth. That looks different for a family of 1 compared to a family of 8, but a family of 8 does not get to take 8 times as much. It's just kind of we've got a system down, and then all remaining food goes to local food banks. We've donated anywhere between 6,000 and 9,000 pounds every season. Usually to the Meridian Food Bank and to Community Ministry Center up on the bench. So, but everybody learns to do everything in the garden. We've connected and we've got partners throughout the city for various things. Not only do we grow fruits and vegetables, we've got 14 fruit trees planted on the park property. So we are in a city park, and a lot of benefits to that. So we've got church properties, school properties, city park properties. So I'm a contractor, basically. I mean, we're nobody, but Meridian Club Gardeners is separate from the city. I volunteer. I'm not paid. But we have a really wonderful working partnership with the city of Meridian. So they supply the water. They supply any irrigation repairs that we need to have done. They built our original irrigation system. They turn our compost piles, so we do have a place to compost, a large one, and they bring in their big machine to be able to do that for us. And really any other things that we need. Besides the vegetables, the fruits and vegetables, we also grow flowers, and that area has gotten bigger and bigger as we've gone along. And then 3 years ago, we added dahlias into the group, and so that's been a really lovely learning opportunity for all of us. Oh, I was at Randy's house just the other day, so we know each other well. And I met him because he allowed me to come to his house to dig up snapdragons for the garden one day. So we did snapdragons and...
Well, you helped me thin myself.
And gladiola. I think gladiolas too. Anyway, so, but we grow flowers. We've learned to add in a number of filler for cut flowers, and we give away flower arrangements, up to about 500 every season in the community. And then we have free and open flower cutting days where people can be invited to come into the garden to cut flowers and deliver those to somebody that they want, or to keep them for themselves. And another one of my gardeners who's kind of a grower and understands like garden layout and everything, she's joined him down there. So 2 of them are working that. I've seen this kind of around the country, kind of a bigger deal on the East Coast. What I've seen is more, they've got a very active community garden association on the East Coast. And, but as far as community engagement goes, so that was an idea I had here. I know Suzanne Ubry, who's got the garden in Middleton at Canyon Springs Outreach. They're connected to a church, but she's a separate 501c3, and Canyon County Extension uses their garden often as a teaching opportunity. And I do know that there's a few gardens, mine especially, would welcome your involvement. And that could be a number of different ways. We think just taking a tour of the garden can be beneficial and helpful and educational. We do things sometimes not the traditional way, maybe not even the way you've read about or learned about. And so I've had master gardeners come through going, why would you do it like that? Well, because after 10 years we've figured out that's what works. But we welcome your input. We've had a number of complications and problems out there. 22 and 24 were extremely difficult years for us. They were the two really hot years. And like I say, I've done this for 13 years. I've never seen anything like it, but we lost numerous tomato plants to probably 3 different diseases. And last year we couldn't grow a zinnia to save our life for the same reason. Zinnias grow like weeds. We've always grown them. At home they were this tall, but in the garden they would get this big and they would just die. And we could not figure that out. And so I know Canyon County goes over there and they'll inspect a garden and then they'll find a problem and then they'll have a disease and then they'll talk about it and then they'll talk about ways to, fix that or what they would do to. I've managed to keep about 80% of them. Some of us have been together for 10 years, which is pretty amazing. And it's just like that's what you do on Tuesday and Saturday, is we just work together. So there's a lot of education that takes place, taking food from a garden to a food bank, because what comes out of the garden isn't perfectly washed like you get in the store. And we do have access to some washing, but we've also learned that food stores better if it's not washed ahead of time. So we figure out what we can wash, what we can't wash, but we try really hard to make what we're taking to the food bank very presentable. We actually teach our gardeners to take the ugly and the broken and the snapped off foods, because that's harder for them to give away. We've also learned to grow foods that we think work better at the food bank. So we're looking for, especially tomatoes that are a little more shelf stable. We do grow a variety of hybrids along with open pollinated and heirlooms, just because we know the hybrids do a little bit better going to the food bank, where if you pick an heirloom, next thing you know, a day later it's done. Yeah, Randy?
I don't think you'd hear it from Juli, but the city of Meridian seems to appreciate her. I believe she was Grand Marshal last year at the parade.
I was Grand Marshal 2 years ago. and the mayor awarded me his legacy award last year, this spring, where are we at? A year ago, yeah. So, yes.
Oh, wait, were you through?
Yes.
Oh, okay. When you said on the bench that you take food, is it those different churches that serve meals on certain days? Is that
Not that one. This one's off of Esquire, and I don't know the name of the cross street. There's a little strip mall there along Houston, and then I think it's Esquire that turns down in there, and there's a little food bank in there behind the church that we found because a neighbor worked at that little food bank. And the reason it was key is years ago we would walk into the Meridian food bank and I would see 10 stacks of tubs this tall full of cucumbers, and I thought, they don't need my 1 tub of cucumbers, but I bet the little food bank could use 1 tub of cucumbers. And I just try to be mindful what's on the shelves, what's going to go. We deliver on Tuesday nights for their Wednesday. They're open Wednesday and Thursday. And then same thing when we deliver on Saturday, it's for their Monday, and we want to make sure that whatever we're delivering is going to get used. Yeah.
You're amazing.
One thing I've been starting to put the word out on due to this terrace business and the volunteer need that we've had is suggesting that gardens maybe reframe volunteer days as in-garden learning experience days, or a way to get hands-on experience. So if people are shy about gardening, or they're just not even sure if they're ready to commit to a season, but they just want that experience just to start, I think there's going to be a real need for it. I think we're going to see an uptick in interest.